Over the last few months, I've been taking my 3DS with me during my daily life more than I have the past few years, and I've noticed a few others around me doing the same, or noticing the appeal of this newly retro-categorized console. But why is that? If most of us look around our house, I'm sure that we'll find something that's far more relevant in most people's minds. The current handheld Nintendo console, the Nintendo Switch, which not only is a portable gaming device, but a console one as well. One that can play a plethora of games, both new and old, one that most people agree to be of quality, and one that is still currently supported by its own company. So why is it that some people find this older device a more attractive offering than the current modern console? Let's try to find that answer as we unlock the appeal of the Nintendo 3DS and why it can never be truly replaced by a successor. Before we get into things, as you probably know, the Nintendo eShop and online services on the 3DS have been officially shut down, and I, along with many others, were mourning the loss of exclusive games that were not going to be accessible to purchase or play with others over the internet anymore. Because of that, the 3DS began to be put in the spotlight when Nintendo officially announced the eShop closure in March of 2023, until the rest of the online services were discontinued in April of 2024. This got many people interested in playing their 3DS once again, baking in the nostalgia, appreciating Nintendo history, and rediscovering classics. But then something interesting happened. We never put the thing down. So why are people playing on their 3DS more? First, let's look at the design and form factor of the 3DS. Immediately, there's one key design feature which makes this form factor a hallmark of handheld gaming, and that's the clamshell design. At times, I think we all took this little hinge for granted, when we could all just shove this small thing in their pocket and not worry about any of the buttons poking out, the screen getting scratched, or even finding the space to put it in there in the first place because of its small size. Let's take a look at where this design came from, the underappreciated Junpei Yokoi. Now, this one guy might have been one of the most influential game designers and inventors in the video game industry, being the man who's played a part in making Donkey Kong, Metroid, the Mario Bros. Arcade game, but also invented key hardware designs which all of us use today, namely the D-pad, which was made for the main subject of discussion right now, the Game & Watch. Looks familiar, right? Yokoi originally thought of this concept while observing a bored passenger fidget with her LCD watch on the train, and was hit with the idea to make some sort of entertaining gaming device that could simultaneously double as a watch, giving us the absolutely groundbreaking title, the Game & Watch, Ball, in 1980. Most people probably recognize the name from that one 2D character that they played an online match with in Super Smash Bros. But the memory of this machine deserves to be preserved, as without it, Nintendo wouldn't have attempted to enter the video game market, with Donkey Kong releasing the following year in 1981, which turned out to be so successful that they made a Game & Watch edition of the game in 1982, with the newly invented D-pad made just for it. I think it's actually pretty cool to think that the D-pad was something invented for one of the world's first video game ports. It really shows how developers really had to get creative with the constraints of the devices they had at the time, and because of that we got two unique inventions that would change the world. The clamshell design was something that was picked up on by products that had nothing to do with video games, like laptops in the following year with the Grid Compass 1101, and even a decade later with the first flip phone, the Motorola StarTAC. The clamshell design was just an incredibly mindful inclusion with the design of the first handheld gaming device, which made it practical to bring with you during travel no matter where you stored it. However, most modern gaming devices don't use this kind of design anymore. Sure, laptops have never been more useful, and phone companies are starting to make these weird flipping screen phones, but where does that leave handheld gaming consoles? Let's take a look at the current stack of handheld gaming devices. You got the Nintendo Switch and Steam Deck in the lead, with your Asus ROG allies of the world following behind. And notably, the clamshell design is missing from all of these portable gaming consoles. Why is that? Over the course of the 2000s, following the wake of the beefy Game Boy, technology progressed to a point where increasingly more powerful handheld devices with the best graphics possible could become more sleek and regain the previous clamshell design found in the Game & Watch design, which could initially be achieved so early due to the LCD screen. This is the time period where you found your Game Boy Advance SPs, your DSs, and lastly, your 3DS. But if you take a look at Nintendo's competition, it was slim pickings for that clamshell design, making it primarily a Nintendo staple, and with the advent of the Nintendo Switch, it seems like it might be a thing of the past. Now, getting into speculation territory, I wanted to bring up some correlations that I found when looking at these handheld consoles in the post-Game & Watch era. If you take a look, you'll find a similar pattern between the power of the console and the possibility of a clamshell design. Now, I'm not saying that the more powerful and expensive the console is, the less likely it is to have a clamshell design, but it is the first of 3 other possible factors that could be attributed to the downfall of the clamshell design. The next few being screen size, or the fidelity of the visuals, console size, and cost. This is all speculation, but more people nowadays want the most powerful handheld device with the best graphics possible to play their big console games with while they're on the go, or simply not at their TV. To achieve this, you not only need to engineer a device that is small enough to fit in your hands, not only have a screen large enough for you to see every detail of the game that's meant to be played on the larger screen, but also a device that people can actually buy without breaking the bank. Because of these factors, I don't think we exist in the world anymore where popular games can run on a device small enough to consider adding a clamshell cover onto. Scrap the fact that Nintendo, the sole proponent of multi-screen gaming, was the only company advocating for the clamshell. It might just not be a practical feature to incorporate for the average user of these new larger devices. And it's not to say that at least Nintendo didn't try to protect the features on the Switch without resorting to a carrying case, as we can see with the Nintendo Switch Lite flip cover. While only being used for the Lite model, Nintendo was aware of the need or want for a way to protect the features on the front of the handheld device, which at least in some way presents the issues that people may face while bringing their modern console on the go, which does not occur with the retro alternative, the 3DS. There's just a minimal amount of worry or concern that goes into your mind when using your 3DS while traveling. I know I find it easy to bring with me just about anywhere and any time because the console is small enough to fit in your pocket and its features are protected. Nintendo knew that would be the case and in fact encouraged it with the game that came pre-installed on every 3DS system, Street Pass. Street Pass was a genuinely special addition to the 3DS's arsenal. Though it needs no introduction for users who grew up with a handheld, its legacy only truly lives on by those who share their experience with it during the 3DS lifespan, as it has no true equivalent today. To those potentially confused, Street Pass was a feature on the 3DS that made it so whenever you traveled in real life with your handheld in tow, you would get notified when you crossed paths with another 3DS user doing the same, and both of your custom characters, or Miis, would appear on each other's consoles. There were many games that you could use these Miis for, and Street Pass accrued a dedicated community over the years, until eventually, one by one, we all began to put our 3DS down in favor of the newest tech on the block. After smartphones could connect you to anyone in the world at the tap of a finger, there was no need for you to go outside to interact with others in order to see that you have shared interests. You could still find some people attempting to see if they can get Street Passes out in the real world today, scouring vast lands to find others lamenting in their digital past. Most Street Passers are few and far in between these days, leaving only the memory of once often visited plazas by those around the globe. Nintendo really did intend for this device to be taken with you wherever you went, not only with its practical design and incentive to explore local communities, but also its main attraction, that being the games available that were designed with the intention to be played on a portable device. On September 16, 2020, the 3DS was officially discontinued, leaving the Nintendo Switch as the sole gaming device that Nintendo produced for the market. With this announcement coming pretty much an exact year after the introduction of the new console SKU, the Nintendo Switch Lite, it became clear that Nintendo believes that they have successfully merged their home and console gaming demographic in a single user base. And with that merge comes a whole other issue. Are all console games made to be compatible with the user base of a handheld console? Well, that's a complicated question. As we discussed earlier, games as far back as the original Donkey Kong arcade game were ported to the handheld market in the form of the Game & Watch, but were not consistent in quality and would occasionally result in a completely different release that would share the same title as the console counterpart. Though we did have banger ports of NES games like Baseball and Tetris from Nintendo to the Game Boy, other companies would attempt to label familiar recreations of their popular games like Sonic the Hedgehog and try to port them to their own handheld consoles like Sega's Game Gear, where the end result was a game that used the same locations, elements, and enemies, but at their core were completely different experiences. This would become a trend for many years, and it would sort of become a blind bag for parents looking to buy their kids the hottest game off the shelves, because little did they know that the Game Boy Advance version of SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom was nothing like the GameCube version. These once common multi-platform console to portable releases showcase the limitations of handheld consoles. That technology had only progressed so far, and for most people, the allure of playing games like Super Mario Galaxy on the DS was nothing more than a myth. But there were exceptions. Remember, handheld releases of console games were not completely unprecedented. For many years, the hardware limitations just made it show that redesigns must have been made to run the games on the portable device. But it was Nintendo who decided to play the long game when it came to choosing to withhold from participating from these kinds of game releases, until they were able to develop their premium handheld, the Game Boy Advance. Due to the compact format compared to previous competitors like the Game Gear, and improved screen quality and battery life, Nintendo's new handheld became fully capable of running the previous console generation's game library with virtually no hard compromises. Only then did it become common to find retro releases from previous generations of consoles on newer handheld devices. Because of this, many people growing up with these ports were able to discover the history of video games and enjoyed fully fledged console experiences on the go. I personally grew up with Super Mario World Advance 2 and Donkey Kong Country 2, both of which were Super Nintendo games that were ported to the Game Boy Advance a decade after their original release, that were made to showcase the powerful new Nintendo handheld. Prior to this turning point in Nintendo handhelds, it was almost impossible to make something that wasn't a turn-based RPG or a side-scroller. Now, if you're paying attention, you might have recognized this kind of strategy before, and that is with the Nintendo Switch and 3DS. Both of these systems have become a sort of historic showcase of the history of Nintendo consoles, with the 3DS being home to a plethora of re-releases from almost every Nintendo console, both console and handheld, and the Nintendo Switch being home to similar ways to experience some of the same games, in addition to continuations of almost long-forgotten series. But let's focus on the star of the show here, the 3DS. Of course, all DS titles were compatible with the console via the cartridge slot. However, via the Virtual Console section of Nintendo's eShop, 6 consoles alone were supported: the NES, Game Boy Color, Super Nintendo on the new models of the 3DS, and even Sega's Game Gear, in addition to Game Boy Advance if you were an early adopter to the handheld. Breaking out of the eShop, many remakes were made for the 3DS, including iconic Nintendo 64 remakes like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, GameCube games including Luigi's Mansion, Wii games like Donkey Kong Country Returns and Xenoblade Chronicles, and then… What? It's alive! The Wii U survives its legacy with fully fledged ports of their console counterparts, releasing not long after their original release. This was the moment where Nintendo officially realized that their handheld hardware had relatively caught up to their console hardware and began giving suitable Wii U titles a second life on the platform. This calls attention to the very question that probed most people's minds at the time. Is it feasible to take modern games with you on the go? Nintendo had the answer. Over the course of a decade, handheld games were evolving to where their scale had a much more substantial structure than they did in the past. Pokemon and other RPGs like Fire Emblem are making the jump into 3D, and full-scale worlds were capable of being rendered on such a small device. And while small-scale platformers and puzzle games were still prevalent mainstays on the console, it became clear that the legacy of the 3DS was becoming much greater than its initial purpose.
開発者でしかもコンソールなんですが、今回のチームはさまざまな、セクションからチームが若い人たちが集まってきて、その中には、コンソールではなくてその携帯ゲーム機の、デザイナーがいたりとか、さまざまなやはりその、ポテンシャルの違う人たちが集まって、その人たちと、そのミッションの中で会話することで、今まで、別々だったかもしれない考え方を、かなり一つの中に、入れて、今あるべきものは何だろうかって考えることができたのはすごく新しいスイッチだったんじゃないかなと思います。こう長い期間ちょっと時間をいただいてですね、今ゲーム機ってどうあるべきなのかってことを考える時間をたくさん持ち、やっぱり今の人たちの、生活環境に合ったゲーム機って何だろうっていうところに割とこう立ち返って、いろんなものをかなりこだわりましたし、さまざまな苦労をそこでもしたんですけれども、もう一つ大事にしたかったのは2人で遊べるということはもちろんそうなんですが、これをやっぱり一つにした時にしっかりしたゲームを遊べるちゃんとキーレイアウトができていて、体験を落とすことなく、デザインすることはすごく大事だったと思って頑張りました。
While some of us clamor for the possibility of Street Pass being revived, Nintendo looked more broadly beyond a single game, and in their remarks, it became clear that they wanted to unite people through their shared love of video games as a medium. The developers over at Nintendo are an incredibly ambitious team, and set out with the goal to create a device that reinterpreted what a video game console should look like, and adapt to the fast-paced life that we all find ourselves in. Now that we're reaching the end of the Switch's life, I think it's safe to say that the developers have accomplished their goal. Not only is it one of the best-selling consoles of all time, but its creation has carved a new market for powerful mobile consoles with competition like the Steam Deck, ROG Ally, and PlayStation Portal attempting to get their share. But where does that leave the 3DS? The creation of the Nintendo Switch not only marked the end of the 3DS's life, but the end of an era of dedicated handheld game devices, where your playtime was restricted to a single device rather than one that can either connect to a TV or transfer their data to other more powerful computers. With this new era of gaming, some of that intimacy of you and the screen could be lost. Whether that could be a long car trip where you're playing Pokemon in the backseat, getting a round of Smash Run in while on your commute to work, or even trying to get a couple stars in Mario 64 DS during your free period in between classes. Today, we see everyone on their phones, scrolling to get the taste of entertainment without any need for investment into what they're actually engaging with. After all, you could just put your phone down after 5 minutes and get back to whatever you were doing before. Nintendo realized that that type of engagement isn't as meaningful as any interaction with another person beside you could be, and that maybe the device we choose to hold in our hands could be used to connect with those immediately around us rather than those who aren't. The 3DS is an innovative museum of all Nintendo games that have come before in a bite-sized package, but it can't respond to the needs of people today as they have before technology graced every aspect of our lives. Nintendo made the Switch to respond to the need for closer connections with the people right next to us, to engage with those who might have a similar interest with the games that we play, rather than avoid them to bury our heads in our own bite-sized adventures. Sure, maybe some of that intimacy from being able to take your 3DS out your pocket anywhere is gone, but what was gained was the ability to share some of that experience with someone else.